Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our program, American Energy for Prosperity. Please welcome Diana Furchtgott-Roth, Director in the Heritage Foundation's Center for Energy, Climate, and Environment.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming, and I would also like to welcome our online audience. I'd like to start by asking all of you a question. Then you're going to have a chance to ask us questions. But first of all, I want to ask you, how many of you think that gasoline prices are too high? I think so too. How many of you think that electricity prices are too high? I think so too. That's why I would like to especially thank the Independent Women's Forum and Senator Lummis for sponsoring the National Energy Appreciation Resolution this week, because using more of American energy and fewer renewables from China makes our gasoline and electricity prices lower. And I also want to thank Representative Jeff Duncan, who has introduced a parallel resolution in the House of Representatives. Well, a lot of people think that if the wind blows, that's free, and if the sun shines, that is free, so that must make electricity less expensive. But that's wrong. Renewables make electricity prices higher because intermittent energy, having wind that blows on and off and sun that doesn't always shine, that raises electricity prices because you have to have backup fossil fuel energy in between. And you also have to transmit this energy from the solar panels and from the wind turbines to where people like you use it. And this gives more economic power to China because China produces about 80% of the world's batteries, which are not just used for EVs, but they're used for storing the wind and solar power. 7 out of the 10 largest solar panel makers and wind turbine makers are located in China. And there's no reason we should be pushing this on the American people. Of course, the reason given is climate change, and we want to lower the world's temperatures. But if we got rid of all the fossil fuels in the United States, this would only make a difference of 0.2 of 1 degree Celsius by the year 2100. So we're spending all these trillions of dollars for nothing. And the trillions of dollars are being spent subsidizing the solar panels, the EVs, the wind turbines. They're being spent by you on higher gasoline prices, higher electricity bills. And over the past 15 years, the United States emissions of carbon have gone down by 1,000 million metric tons because of our use of clean natural gas. And China's emissions have gone up by 5,000 million metric tons because what they're doing is they are making the solar panels and the wind turbines with coal-fired power plants. They're building 2 new ones every week. And by 2050, they'll have about half of the world's coal-fired power plants. This is because China has coal. They don't have oil and natural gas the way we do. So in order to produce these things, they are using their own resource, just as we need to be using our own resources, which is clean natural gas and oil. So with that, I want to thank again Senator Lummis, and I want to introduce our 2 speakers. So Senator Lummis was born on a cattle ranch in Laramie County in Wyoming, and she is the most well-qualified senator in the U.S. Senate. She was sworn in as senator in January 2021. Let me just tell you a few of the things that Senator Lummis has done. She has operated cattle ranches and the sweetgrass development in Laramie County. She served as Wyoming State Treasurer, and I can't even balance my own checkbook, and she served as the treasurer for the state of Wyoming and a member of the Wyoming State House and Senate. On the federal level, the senator has served for 8 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, fighting to cut spending, keep public lands open, and passing the National Forest System Trail Stewardship Act in 2016. This was a bipartisan effort to maintain over 150,000 miles of trails in national forests. So when you next hike a trail in a national park, you need to thank Senator Cynthia Lummis. So, Senator, why don't you come up? I'm also going to, now I'm going to introduce Mandy Gunasekara. She's director of the Center for Energy and Conservation at the Independent Women's Forum, which had the idea of sponsoring National Energy Appreciation Week. And she's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Mandy earned a JD from the University of Mississippi School of Law and a BA from Mississippi College. She served as the Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Regulation at the Environmental Protection Agency, and she spearheaded many of the administration's greatest energy and environmental policy achievements during President Trump's term. Mandy was the chief architect of the Paris Accord withdrawal and the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. She served in numerous roles across the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, focusing on energy and environmental issues. Mandy, please come up. Well, let's start with a question about National Energy Appreciation Resolution. I wanted to know why you introduced it and what you hope to get out of an annual celebration focused on America's energy.
Well, thanks for the question, and thank you, Heritage and the Independent Women's Forum, for having this forum. We want to call attention to and acknowledge and celebrate the efforts of America's energy producers, people who are working on oil rigs, in coal mines, doing the back office accounting, everyone who is involved in the energy business is keeping America strong. It is a national security issue. It is an American independence issue. It's a freedom issue. And these are the people that are on the front lines. And so I think that it's appropriate that we celebrate their work, acknowledge their importance in our economy, and do this annually.
Absolutely. Mandy, we know this is so important for families. Can you say something about that and how it was your idea also?
Yeah, certainly. So Senator Lummis did such a good job explaining why a National Energy Appreciation Day is justified. Let's take some time to recognize the fact that when we flip the switch, the lights, generally speaking, come on, and it's something we take advantage of, but you don't think of the complex process to extract the resources, refine it, transport it, and deliver it to market, as well as the men and women who wake up at the crack of dawn or work through the night to ensure that there are minimal to no disruptions. And if you want to appreciate the energy systems and the energy access we have in this country, just go to about any other country, including Europe. They are rife with disruptions because they don't prioritize access to cheap, affordable energy. That's extremely important to the economy writ large, but especially families. Families today are struggling in the face of Bidenomics that has made the price of just about everything go up, and the day one war on American energy in the traditional sense, coal, oil, and natural gas, that started with an executive order canceling the Keystone XL pipeline and really went down from there. So when energy prices go up, it impacts everything that we do, but it typically falls and complicates family budgets, but it also falls hardest on the most vulnerable in society. I've testified a couple of times on Capitol Hill about the impact to low-income and minority communities. And there is a woman, Donna Jackson, who is on our advisory committee. I know she had registered to be here, and if she's not here in person, she's probably listening, but she spends a lot of time in these communities assessing the impact of any slight increase in the price of energy. And I think she said it best, that at the end of the day, the price of energy, when it goes up, that becomes a barrier to upward mobility. And we should be working to reduce those, not only because it's the right thing to do, but we know how to do it in this country.
Senator, gasoline's about $4 a gallon in Wyoming right now. Can you tell us something about Wyoming's role in the U.S. energy mix?
Yeah, I'm very proud of Wyoming's role. We produce about 8% of all of the energy in the United States. We're number 1 in coal, we're number 8 in oil, number 9 in natural gas. And we used to be higher, but so much of our mineral wealth is on federal lands. And ever since the Biden administration took office, they have been singularly focused on shutting down energy development in the United States. And the easiest place for them to go is federal lands. So since the Biden administration took office, there have only been 3 oil and gas leases, sales in the Gulf of Mexico, 0 in Alaska. 0. This is unprecedented, and it is a direct, overt, intended consequence of Joe Biden's election. He said that he wanted to cut down fossil fuel, that he wanted to shut it down, and he has. And it has taken us from energy independence to a place where he's running to Saudi Arabia and asking them to sell us oil. That's unnecessary. It's stupid policy. And it's hurting our country. It's hurting jobs. It's hurting our revenue. It's hurting our national security, our standing around the world. And there's no excuse for what the Biden administration is doing. If you look at ingenuity in this country and its ability to address the issues that they're concerned about. They're concerned about greenhouse gas emissions. As you said earlier, we're an infinitesimally small contributor to greenhouse gases, especially compared to China and India. Furthermore, our efforts of producing more and more available electricity at lower and lower greenhouse gas emissions has been proven year in and year out since the Clean Air Act passed. And these efforts continue. We know we can do it better, more, cleaner, faster, more efficiently, but we only do it with ingenuity. We don't do it with regulation. We do it with innovation.
Yes, and we're very proud of our chief statistician, Kevin Dyer-Ratner, who has imported the government energy models into Heritage and who has calculated that even getting rid of all fossil fuels would only make a difference of 0.2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Mandy, gas is now $3.45 in Mississippi. How are people finding that?
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to stay on top of any budgets, whether you're talking about gas prices or electricity prices, or the fact that grocery prices continue to go up and skyrocket in a lot of ways. That's hard for all states, but especially a state like Mississippi, where people are living in the lower income bracket of the United States. So it just goes to show how important energy is, and so much of the rhetoric is misplaced around energy development and environmental protection. The two can, in fact, go hand in hand. We proved this resoundingly during the Trump administration, where we cut regulations, we unleashed U.S. oil and gas, and we continued to reduce emissions across all metrics. Whether you're talking about greenhouse gases, we lead the world in reducing that, according to the International Energy Administration, in clean air, in clean water, and in addressing legacy pollution issues that largely falls in certain lands, a lot of federal lands that we address through our Superfund sites. So all that being said, prices can have devastating impacts as families struggle under the current economic situation, and energy is a main part of it. And right now, energy prices are going up because this administration and the officials in charge of energy and environment decisions think that you can't have a growing and expanded energy development industry here in the United States while improving the environment. But it's actually quite the inverse, and we proved this not too long ago.
And the other thing I'd like to point out about Mandy and her work with the Trump administration is that in Congress there's really only three ways that we can bend the curve and reduce our national debt. One is cut spending. We've shown no guts to do that. One is raise taxes. But the other is to grow the economy faster than the debt. During the Trump administration, they were doing that. And it was because, and specifically because, of energy development. Mm-hmm. Now, when COVID hit, they could no longer grow the economy faster than the debt. But during the Trump administration, you all were doing it. And that is something that Congress has never been able to match.
Senator, are you concerned about the growing reliance on foreign entities that the President Biden's energy policy gives us? I mean, on the one hand, there's OPEC, and the president goes to Saudi Arabia and asks them to produce. On the other, there's China, which is just reaping a windfall. Russia is also reaping a windfall because oil prices are going up, so it's selling its own oil at higher prices. And prices are set by expectations. We could just lower our oil prices if President Biden got up and said, look, the facts have changed. I'm changing my mind.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, it's a huge national security issue. We have China helping support Russia in their war against Ukraine because we are buying Chinese technology in the form of wind and solar infrastructure. So we buy their batteries, their wind technology, their solar technology. Then they take our money and join with Russia to fight our friends. It's so obvious the risks that we're taking on the international stage, preventable risks, by refusing to acknowledge our ability to be energy independent and be in the driver's seat globally on energy development as well as environmental improvements.
Do you think families and women who support the Independent Women's Forum, Mandy, are concerned about our dependence on China?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, increasingly people see what's going on in China. They are exposed to what happens when you live under an oppressive regime. You've heard about a social credit score, a bad idea that is finding its way here in the United States. But you also, a lot of the women and a lot of the points that we make through our energy and environment work also bring up the fact that a lot of these batteries are made from minerals where the mining is done by children. Yeah. And that is an absolute problem. It doesn't matter if you're from the left or the right, everyone can agree that 5-year-olds should not be picking through dirt piles to find cobalt, but that actually is what's going on, and this has been well documented for a long time. Now, I know there's efforts to shore up these supply chains, whether you're talking about electric vehicle batteries or other critical minerals, but what we should be doing is bringing that mining activity here in the United States. And again, we have the resources, we have the wherewithal, we have the ability to do it. Unfortunately, you have actions like in this administration where they renege long-term leases. We saw this play out with the Twin Metals mines in the Minnesota area, where the administration's taking away the ability to cultivate these resources in ways that are consistent with not only child labor laws and humanitarian laws, but people who work in these jobs are earning a higher than average wage. And so that just creates all sorts of additional growth and opportunity at the local level. A lot of this is in rural communities similar to where I am from. So the IWF, the Independent Women's Forum, and a lot of the people who ascribe to our newsletter and other items, they want to know the big picture. They want to know the good, the bad, and the very ugly. And when it comes to the cultivation of a lot of these minerals, it's a very ugly story.
Let's change the topic now to cryptocurrency. Senator, you have been a leader on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and there's a lot of talk about the use of energy for computer processors, and sometimes it's even referred to as crypto mining, even though it's not real mining. Can you tell us something about your work on that and how Ola Move is to crypto and also charging cell phones and the huge amount of data. How is that affecting energy use?
Well, one of the great things about mining Bitcoin is that it can be used to balance the energy loads. For example, if you have transformers that have more electricity than is currently needed, Bitcoin miners can ramp up their mining operations. And then when there's heavy demand, for example, in Mississippi, when the air conditioning is needed, they can ramp the mining down. So they're very efficient users of electricity because they can time their use to help balance electric loads. So Bitcoin mining, which is a proof of work effort, which means it expends energy to produce Bitcoin, just like mining in the normal sense uses energy to produce gold and silver and oil and gas and coal. It's the same with Bitcoin.
But it's not real mining going down in a mine.
That's correct. It's computers.
Way.
Sometimes they're immersed in a fluid, and sometimes they're air-cooled. But because they are heavy energy users, they heat up, and so they need to be cooled, either air-cooled or fluid-cooled. And so frequently in Wyoming, they situate near energy sources that are underutilized and actually help the utilities balance the use. Another thing we're doing in Wyoming, and this is happening right now, is if you've got an oil well or a gas well that is not yet connected to a pipeline, they're having to flare or emit the gas until they can hook it up to a pipeline. Bitcoin miners are coming in, they're hooking directly up to that flared or vented gas and using it right on site to mine Bitcoin. In other words, you can pull in a trailer full of computers and hook it up to a source that needs to be consumed rather than wasted, and you can mine Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add on to that. Another nonprofit I work with, the Satoshi Action Fund, has worked very, very closely with your office on all the Bitcoin mining efforts at the state and local level. And Wyoming really has set the stage. And Bitcoin mining is it's a flexible tool that can be used for energy stability, as the senator explained, as well as environmental improvements. And what I would just add to it is, I spent 4 years at the EPA working on a number of regulations, but one of them was aimed at reducing methane emissions. That issue is still not settled 6 years later. What we have right now is a private sector created ready-made technology that can literally be added into an operation that immediately reduces the emissions profile. So we have been working in other ways to find either state regulations or entities that are interested in expanding the use of this technology, not just as an energy stabilizer, but also as clean environmental technology that again is ready-made, can be used, and it also addresses a lot of the cost issue. It creates value, the value in Bitcoin. We can have disagreements about what that should be, what it's going to be, and how we will ultimately use it, but there is a recognized value, and a lot of problems when trying to integrate new environmental technologies, especially from a regulator's perspective, is that upfront cost, and Bitcoin mining addresses a lot of that.
I'd like to ask you both one more question before we move to audience Q&A, both the in-person audience and the virtual audience that can send questions via chat. And here's my question. Republicans have a reputation of not caring about the environment. What do you both think that Republicans can do to improve our image? After all, if we produced more clean natural gas and oil, people's gasoline and electricity bills would go down, and everyone wants that to happen. So I was just wondering if you could both give me your views on that before we turn to audience questions.
Well, in addition to the benefits of using natural gas for cooking, for example, we have many of our environmental programs, conservation programs, funded by revenues from oil and gas directly, whether it's Land and Water Conservation Fund or other environmental and conservation programs. They're funded by the revenues from oil and gas. These are direct monies that are going to direct conservation efforts, whether it is to preserve habitat, to preserve migration corridors for wildlife.
To preserve your national forest trails.
Oh, absolutely.
That we're all going to go hiking on.
Yeah, it's a direct correlation between fossil fuels. I'm not even talking about wind and solar. I'm talking about fossil fuel energy and conservation programs. An absolute direct pairing that makes conservation programs work.
Yeah, and I would add, I think the advice to Republicans in general is to lean in and speak up. We have the better ideas that are way more effective. We actually have the better track record. The only thing we haven't done until recently is seed the narrative in a lot of ways. So it really is taking advantage of any opportunity to talk about clean air, clean water, cleaning up lands, and creating more efficient processes that lead to a lower emissions future. I would also say avoid using the language of the left. So much of it, net zero, is rooted in pushing policies designed to control, not improve outcomes, and they're not really rooted in reality. So I think those are 2 points, and the last thing is to elevate the men and women in the energy industry, from the coal workers, oil and gas operators, to our wind and solar installers. They are all a part and an integral part of the American story, and they can tell their story best. So finding ways to elevate their story, whether it's through your personal platforms or if you're a sitting senator, a member of Congress, I know you've done this, Senator, going out to sites that are newly operational and just bringing that type of attention. I think it's a way to talk about energy in a very personal sense. And I think that's a way to go about reshaping the conversation and improving the image of Republicans and conservatives in general on this issue.
Yes, even if we were to paper over the United States with solar panels and wind turbines, we still need fossil fuels to make those solar panels and the wind turbines and to be backups. So the idea of net zero, I mean, it's really a myth. It cannot happen in reality. Why don't we start out by taking some questions from all of you now that I asked you questions? Yes, why don't we start over here? Please identify yourself and your organization, and someone will bring you a microphone here.
Thank you. Robert D. Domenico, Cargo Fish, LLC. Thank you all. Very informative. I myself have been in energy for
and can you ask a question?
31 years. And the question is, in the after the event, can I show you the details of a new last mile distribution system technology, which has been ignored by the Democrats in power in the state of New Jersey, in the US DOT, and yet it's a technology that I can show you reduces the specific energy intensity of last mile distribution by about 3 orders of magnitude compared to how we currently do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we would be very interested in seeing that.
You know, Robert brings up a great point about innovation.
Yeah.
We can innovate our way to success in the United States with regard to energy policy. I brought something from the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. This is from the Center of Carbon Capture and Conversion. At the University of Wyoming, they are making bricks out of coal. And they're experimenting with making asphalt out of coal. Mm-hmm. New non-thermal uses of coal to meet everyday needs in America. It produces less volatile organic compounds. It is lighter weight. It has some good thermal qualities. It's less expensive. These are the kind of innovations that America is best at.
Yes.
There's a company in Wyoming called Spire that takes natural gas that someone buys but is not ready to use. They inject it into the ground, store it until it's needed. The buyer calls them and says, we're ready to have our natural gas delivered. They reproduce it, clean it up to the quality it was in when they received it, and ship it on down the line. It is a game changer in the way that we can utilize natural gas when we need it and store it in the meantime. These are all very new innovations that are going to change America. It sounds like your technology is along those lines. These are the kind of things that America needs to concentrate on, not regulating and banning things out of existence.
Exactly, and it was American innovation that thought of horizontal drilling and hydrofracturing that enabled us to get all this oil and gas out of the ground and clean up our emissions. Andy, did you have a comment?
No, I just amen to that. I think it was well said.
So question from the audience, question number 1, is anybody from the virtual audience, is anybody working to get somebody who actually understands oil and gas into contact with Pope Francis, or somebody who understands climate science? This is from William Cunningham, a research scientist in residence at St. Mary's University. I don't know if any of you want to take that.
I nominate him.
Yeah,
I nominate the guy who asked the question. Obviously, he is aware that the Pope is not hearing the full story. And it sounds like he might be Catholic, so he might have in there with the Pope. So I nominate you.
I concur on that. Would just say that the Pope does have an important platform. I remember we were just talking about this in, I believe it was 2015 or 2016. He came to the United States and they had put out an environmental encyclical. And the problem with it is that it was reflective of not being exposed to the full story when it comes to climate science, when it comes to what actually lends itself to reduced emissions without oppressing the most vulnerable among us. So there is an opportunity, and I concur with the recommendation.
So here's another anecdote that I find amusing as a rancher. As we've heard from Bill Gates and others, they believe that cattle are producing greenhouse gases and that they're emitters. Mm-hmm. Oxford University created a more accurate model to model whether cattle are greenhouse gas emitters. When they applied the new model to cattle operations in Italy, they found out that Italian cattle are carbon sinks. They actually trap greenhouse gases in the ground.
How about American cattle? Just Italian cattle?
My guess is that American cattle also are carbon sinks, not carbon emitters. So some of these formulas have been applied in ways that produce results that are simply incorrect. And so that's another way that innovation, looking at data in new ways, and Oxford's not exactly known as somebody who's going to be a shill for the cattle industry. Yeah. So these are people that are applying a second look at the way that some of these formulas were originally drafted.
And this is so important because energy security is food security. And we had farmers in Belgium and the Netherlands rioting because their animals were going to get taken away and they were going to be made to farm without nitrogen fertilizers, which would drastically reduce the yields. And Sri Lanka's president had to flee the country because he had a ban on chemical fertilizers and the prices went up. So food bills are really linked to energy. Do we have another question from here, from the audience? Yes, please identify yourself and wait for the microphone.
Evelina Chopla. I'm with the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And first, I want to thank you for championing Bitcoin mining and blockchain technologies. And I'd like to ask you, from your perspective, what it is that you think has been an impediment to the further implementation and adoption of blockchain technologies across industries.
I think that blockchain technologies are just beginning to be deployed in ways that are innovative. It takes a while for these technologies to catch on. For example, the state of West Virginia has just recently begun to put automobile titles on the blockchain. So if you lose your auto title, or you want to buy and sell a car outside of a dealership, or even if you are a dealership, you put the title on the blockchain. In West Virginia, by the way, the state of Virginia makes a fee on that, so it's a revenue source for the state of West Virginia. They can put the whole country's, every automobile in the country, they can put their titles on the West Virginia blockchain and look up their titles, and their titles are safe and secure. You don't have to stand in line at the county assessor's office or the county treasurer's office to get a replacement auto title. That is an innovative, first of its kind example of how the blockchain is being used, and there are thousands of examples just like that. So I think those kinds of innovations are going to start to reveal themselves. Now, my personal opinion is that blockchain will emerge as a utility technology. It is a ledger, and it will be very useful and very ubiquitous. Maybe not so much as a store of value or a means of exchange. That will be what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin will be the store of value and a means of exchange. Blockchain technology will be like an app on your iPhone. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to use blockchain technology for just about anything that you can think of that you could use an app for. And it's just around the corner.
Yeah, I would add it's a very flexible technology that can be applied in a number of applications. I think one current impediment, as with any new technology, there's those that will try to paint it in a negative light. We're seeing that from some Democrats on Capitol Hill, where their problem isn't the environmental concerns that they raise or the energy use concerns they raise. It's more, and specifically with regard to Bitcoin, it's more about the ability to control that means of exchange. Yep. And those that want to strengthen that control from the center on out tend to not like blockchain or the applications of it like Bitcoin.
Our next question is from Marjorie Cash in the state of Minnesota. She says, I live in Minnesota, but when she contacts her senator's offices, Senators Klobuchar and Smith, with her concerns about the environment, she only gets President Biden's talking points. What can I do to get support in the US Senate that I do not support what the Democrats and Biden are doing? She wants to know.
Well, I think she should continue to voice her concerns to Democrats because in large part, Republicans feel the way that Mandy and I do. And Democrats are notoriously hidebound to support President Biden, whether they agree with him or not. And I think that's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are very good at sticking together, regardless of what they would think individually. Republicans are more apt to think for ourselves, which is really problematic if you're trying to put together a cohesive agenda. But it's not problematic if we look at what made America great. America was made great by individual thinkers, people who were not lemmings, people who didn't follow the crowd, people who thought for themselves. So even though Republicans are messy, witness yesterday in the House, we're messy. We don't do things as a group as well as Democrats do, including use talking points of any president or any individual. But what we do really well is think independently. And even though it's messy and it's ugly and it's difficult, we manage to find the sweet spot. I was in the U.S. House when John Boehner resigned. And we didn't have, that came as a big surprise. to a lot of us. And we didn't have a successor in mind. And I went to a conference prepared to nominate Jason Chaffetz for speaker. And Kevin McCarthy's name was being put forward, and other people's names were being put forward. And that conference adjourned without a speaker because we needed to find a consensus candidate, somebody who could bridge the gap within our conference. And you know what? We found that person. It was Paul Ryan. And Paul Ryan carried forward. And we ended up, in part because of Paul Ryan's incredible mind with regard to the tax code. It's part of the reason that when President Trump became president, we had such a good solution on the tax front. That's going to happen this time too. It's going to be messy for a week or 10 days. They're going to settle on a new speaker. They're going to find a consensus person. They know the heat is on them. They know that in order to save face, they're going to have to advance their agenda quickly, and they will. And you'll be proud of the U.S. House a year from now. That's my opinion.
I would also add to the listener's question, reach out to other senators, like Senator Lummis, who very clearly is not going to, her and her team, who I've had the pleasure of working with, they're not going to dish out talking points. They're going to listen and speak specifically to the issues that matter. And also in a state, you can consider reaching out to your local state representatives, everyone from the utility commissioners to the state AG and on. I'm not sure of the landscape in Minnesota. It may not be favorable, given more favorable than what you get at the federal level from an energy perspective, but to certainly reach out at the local level or look for local state nonprofits. Just about every state has the equivalent of a Minnesota Energy Institute or something along those lines that you can reach out to, get substantive information, and then help going forward.
There's also been a movement of people from states that have very restrictive renewable energy policies to those that have broader, more inclusive energy policies. So we see people, for example, leaving California and going to Texas and Florida. So people are voting with their feet if they can't change their senators' policies. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank you, Senator, for inaugurating National Energy Appreciation Week. I hope that it's going to be a feature as far as the eye can see. And I want to thank Mandy for having the Independent Women's Forum fully behind this issue. And thank you both as speakers. Let's give our speakers a big hand. And thanks for coming.